Journey in. I specialize in creating pipelines that become paid waitlist for service providers, agencies, both digital and marketing. And I wanted to share with you what is probably the best lead generation strategy for attracting qualified leads to buy for ready to buy clients in 2024. So let me move my little screen here real quick so you can see this. There we go. So I used this process back in Q4 in 2023 after I had lost 2 contracts with clients who ended up making some bad marketing mistakes before I got in there and lost their capital. And I was able to, using this exact strategy without doing any inbound or outreach or outbound, generate $85,000 in contracts with just 2 clients. So I'm going to share the exact system, teach you how to apply it, show you what needs to be done and the mistakes that people make and how to avoid them. So let's dive in. First off, we really need to understand exactly what our ideal client needs to see. And this is one of the big mistakes people make in content marketing is they get really into this idea of like, oh, there's got to be tofu and bofu and mofu and all these different frameworks to write copy. But before you even get a framework to write copy, you need to understand what copy and content you need to be writing. So this is the framework I've come up with using 4 different content strategies. I've distilled it down to a very simple principle. So there's this great book called They Ask, You Answer, where if you ignore the SEO content, which is kind of out of date, they have this one idea, which is to really understand how to sell a client with content. You need to anticipate the questions they will have and then answer them before they ask the question. It's an incredible idea because by doing this, you make it very easy for the lead to see that, hey, this person understands what it is I want to know. They understand the questions and answers that I need to go to the next phase. And they're giving me the space I need with the content they create to let me validate them passively. And that's key. Using this process will get the customers to actually come to you ready to buy because they'll validate you passively while you're doing your outreach and your other marketing. So start by identifying their questions. So this is the actual hardest part of this process because we have this thing called expert blindness where we know a lot about what we do. And so we oftentimes will skip a lot of explanation or implementation because we know what needs to go in, but we need to understand that the people we're writing the content for don't. And this is something that comes up a lot. So sit down and ask yourself, like, what are the real pain points, right? But don't focus on them. And then transition the pain points away from copy to questions. What would they want to know? So I help, like I said, people fill pipelines and make them into paid wait lists. So the question is like, first off, like, how do I make a pipeline? What kind of content fills a pipeline? Do I need to do inbound? Do I need to do outbound? How big should my pipeline be? What offer should I make my pipeline? What constitutes a full pipeline? And so you start to think about it from that perspective of like, oh, like these are all the questions my customers would be asking. If I answer them, I make it easy for them to say yes to me. I'll do another example because I really want to like clarify this. Let's go really out on a limb. Let's say I am an ad agency that helps companies scale Facebook ad spend to $100,000 per ad per winner within a month. So the first question is, how do I create a Facebook ad strategy? What type of Facebook ads will we be using? Will this be for cold layer traffic or will it be warm layer traffic? How quickly will the ads work? How much do I need to spend on each ad? Do you need me to create the ads or will you create the ads? Will you be tracking the ads? Will I help you make these decisions? Do I need video? So these would be questions that like an ad agency could answer with their content and just get so many more clients because their clients are going to read it and they go, oh, all the answers I need to see are here. I'm going to talk to this person. And later on, I'm going to explain to you why doing this process transitions you from just another provider to a guide. I'm doing it right here. Like I'm explaining the exact process I use. Will somebody take and use it themselves? Sure, go ahead. And then tell me that you did it and you did well because it's still going to make me look good. And I honestly can't help everybody. I can take between 15 or 20 clients and I have another thing that I do as well. But for the most part, I want people to win. What's going to happen is people who are going to see this, who are going to understand why this works, are just going to say, I just want it done right the first time, and they'll reach out to me. The same way your clients will reach out to you. So you're not going to win every client, but you're going to win the best clients, which takes us to number 2. Understand their questions from the beginner's mindset. So we talked about the concept of expert blindness, but let's dig into that a little bit. So a beginner's mindset helps us look at what questions people who don't have the experience that we have would have about these solutions. So I mentioned a few answers people would ask, right? But let's go even deeper and really think about it. Like if I was explaining this to a 12-year-old, so they could then turn around and clearly explain the same thing to somebody else. How would I tell that to them? Now, there are certain times where you're going to use terms that are very industry relevant. A 12-year-old might not understand the term pipeline, right? But if I did tell them, I help agencies get so many clients that get so excited to work with them that they'll get on a wait list and pay to be on that wait list, right? That is how you can take a complex idea and make it something so a beginner can understand. And the reason for this is one of the greatest powers of content marketing is creating clarity. And the more clear your content is, the easier it is to get people reading it, engaging with it, going through your whole ecosystem, and then just brainwashing themselves about why you're the best. Next, let's plan your content. So people say, I don't really have a content plan. What should I do? And what a content plan is like a calendar. Like, what are you going to post every day for all month? And this is where a lot of people struggle. They'll pick up speed because they get a little motivated. They watch a video like this. They go, they do 3, 4, 5 posts. Maybe one post does well, and they just kind of, they just deflate because this is an ongoing game. And so the easiest way to make the ongoing game work is to plan the content that you're going to create every day around the flow of your customers' questions. So going back to this concept of identifying their questions, let's go a little bit further and say, okay, so using myself as an example, one of the questions a client would ask me from a beginner mindset is like, how does content get me clients? So then I would write an article that explains to them how content helps people validate themselves to choose them. So then the next question would be like, well, how can I write content that gets leads to validate me? Okay, so now I can talk about diving into understanding what the lead wants. So then my next post could be like, well, how do I know what my lead really wants? So then I explain to them to think about it, to talk to their customers, to do the research. So then my next question could be like, well, what is the best type of research for each type of vertical? And then I could explain there are different types of research that work, and I would give them a hierarchy of stuff. And then I would explain at the end of it, you can use this format to talk with your customers. And the next question could be, how do I get comfortable talking with my customers? And so you can just start to plan your content around the questions your customers would ask. And what's great is you have that one core idea, which is like your service, right? Like I build pipeline, I make pipelines into paid wait lists. Here are all the ways I do it. So everything I explain around it goes back to that main idea. And then finally, you want to use multiple content types. So you want to use long posts and short posts. You want to use videos. You want to use carousels. You want to use memes. Make sure it's like industry relevant. And I'll later explain, like, you want to really write and respond to people in your own voice. Don't try to be professional and button up and like an ABM white label marketer. Be who you are, because ultimately the client is going to work with you. So the more comfortable they are with who you are as a writer, the more comfortable will they be with you as a person. But to find the content type that works best for you, find what you're really good at producing and make that a majority. I am a great writer and a great speaker, so I produce a ton of writing and a ton of videos. But, I'm not a great designer. So I'll do a couple carousels. I'll get on Canva. And by the way, Canva Pro is great. It's a great investment for this kind of stuff. But for the most part, I lean into what I'm good at. So that is how you understand and create content for what your client wants. Let's go to the next thing. The publish the pipeline framework for lead generation. So this is how you can publish your content to create a lead generation pipeline to keep your business busy. So first, you have to publish, and I forgot the E here. You can publish powerful content that answers their questions. We already talked about this, but I'll dig in a little bit, right? The reason this generates leads is you're not doing gatekeeping. You're not like putting the answers they want behind a wall that says, give me something and then I'll have a sales conversation with you. And this is why I love content marketing is unlike copywriting where you're convincing somebody that's shown intent, with content marketing, you're letting people validate themselves with the questions and answers they want. So the people that are reading my stuff are already my ideal customer. The people that read all of my stuff become my customers, right? So you want to publish content that really pulls back the curtain. Like this is a very long video explaining the entire process I use, how it works, and how I create it. You could just take and do it, but the people that want it done for them are going to talk to me. So I don't have to try to win clients that aren't right for me. And by making my content powerful, I'm winning the hearts of the people that want to work with me. And next thing you need to do, and this goes back into the anticipate and answer question that we had here, where it's like plan your content flow, is you want to use transitions between the content pieces that you publish to get the client to keep reading your content. And this is a big thing. So here, let me explain this a little bit. if you were reading a piece of content and everything that you need to know is there and there wasn't an introduction to another idea at the end of it, that's called a closed loop. So it's like this, it goes and it's closed and it's like complete. So you read that, there's no need to read anymore. There's no reason to engage. I got the thing I need. But let's say I'm going to create an open loop, which is basically creating a transition to keep them reading. So instead of doing a closed loop, I'm going to go, I'm going to create an infinity circle that keeps them engaged. And here's how you do it. So let's say I just wrote an article that explains how you can generate qualified leads by writing content that answers questions that they want answered. Okay, so I've explained that great content gets leads to qualify themselves, and when they are ready to talk with you, they will come into your system. The next thing I would then say at the end of the article is to find out how to not just get leads into your system, but knocking down your digital door to talk to you. Check out my next post. So a transition is like a hook for your next article, right? So here's another example. I'm just making these up off the top of my head. Let's say that I am a digital service provider who creates back-end softwares for B2B companies that do between $10 and $20 million for the sales. And I'm writing content about how important it is to have resources like this in-house because it lowers your costs, right? So it's like, hey, I just wrote a post about how having this over the long term not just lowers your costs, but increases your site performance. And so then I would say, like, to find out why site performance doesn't just increase the value of your company, but also how fast the lead talks to you, check out my next post. And so now I've got a relevant intro for them to keep reading. And what's great is if you do this throughout all of your posts, it makes it very easy for them to go through your ecosystem. Now, one of the things to consider is not all of you are going to be publishing on LinkedIn. Some of you might be publishing on different social platforms. One of the things that can help is understanding how your feed works. If all of your comments, your posts, or whatever you're going to be doing can be siloed into a single place that they can scroll through, you don't really need to have links. But if the things are going to be siloed onto themselves, like here's a piece of content and it's in like this universe by itself, what you could do is then, if you like, for great examples in LinkedIn, let's say I have a comment, it's like, I have my transition statements like, to see what's next, check out the comments. And then for my very first comment, I would then post the link to that next piece of content. So that way they just keep themselves cycling through. Finally, you need to have a next step CTA. So 99% of content marketing fails when it goes for the CTA. And the reason why is you are selling the final step, right? Which is stupid. You've done the hard work of creating amazing content that validates your leads. So immediately they go, this guy is right for me, or this girl's right for me, or this company's right for me. But it's still a selling process. You don't get to skip the line. No amount of great content is going to take you from curious to customer in a blink. What's going to happen is they're going to take the next step. So have your CTA be the next step. So for most of my clients, that's just having a quick talk with me. Most of them, I just send a WhatsApp, find out what your sales process is. And if you're at a bigger company, that might be a Zoom meeting, could be joining a newsletter, whatever, right? So what I would do is send them to a booked call calendar. And I tell them, like, hey, if you're really interested in having this applied for you so you don't have to think about it, click the link below. We'll find a time to chat. I'll see if I can help. I might not be that type of outreach. I might be looking to build an email list and then sell my email list. And then my next step CTA is like, to find out not just how to apply this, but the entire system, click the link below to join my mailing list. You'll even get a free copy of XYZ Guide or XYZ Playbook. The CTA needs to sell the next step. You can't say, hey, if you're interested in having me work on you, it's $25,000 a year. Click the link below to sign up now. That'll never work. But if you make it to where they can start the conversation to get the answers they want from you at that point, you will get the sell. So recap, publish content that answers questions they have before they ask them. Use transitions to get them into your entire content circle. Take them from a closed loop to an infinite loop that keeps them reading, and finally make the next step that you ask them to take easy. It's just the next step, not the final step. Okay, so let's go into the deeper parts of this. First, anticipating and answering client questions in the burning nature. So I didn't read it right, I apologize, but you get the idea. So first thing is explain it to them like they're 5 years old. Most content sucks because it's written to make the person who's writing it sound really smart. If you read my content, it sounds like I'm talking to you. It sounds like I'm having a conversation with you as a person, right? So you want to do the same thing. You want your content to feel like you're like an authority, but you're also a guide. Like, think about a really good personal guide on a tour or a safari or even like a trainer, right? They're not going to be speaking to you. Like if you're at the trainer and he's like, we're going to do back delts today. We're going to exert 4,000 pounds of square inch of force per metric inch of muscle, blah, blah, blah. Like, you're like, what? But if he's like, hey man, today we're going to pump that back. You said the same thing, but the second one lets everyone understand what you're saying. So when you write content, keep it simple. Now, if you're not sure like how to do this in practice and you don't have experience doing it, a couple things you can do is go get a reading score calculator. So anything that you write, copy, paste it, put in the reading score calculator, try to get it below like a sixth or seventh grade reading level. So that way, basically, the idea is even a sixth or seventh grader could read it and really understand. And if you're really struggling with it, what you could do is you could write an AI prompt. And so put an AI prompt that says, hey, ChatGPT-4, I would love to make what I wrote here a lot easier to understand. Please do the following for me. Go through the content that I just wrote, clarify it, and rewrite it so somebody at a seventh grade or lower reading level could understand it at a glance. Please don't lose the focus, the messaging, the tone, or the ask, but make it so it's easier for people to engage with. Then post your comment, go through, make sure it's good, post the response ChatGPT has after you've gone through to make sure everything's there, back into the reading score calculator, and just keep doing that until you hit that score, okay? So let's go for the next one. Test great hooks. This is key. If you can't get the hook right, nothing else matters. And the reason for that is the hook is what gives the reader permission to read the rest of your content. I could have the absolute most amazing content that answers everybody's questions, but if there's not a hook that gets me to read it, nothing else matters. And so a great hook is where you get and keep their attention. How do you create a great hook? Well, during the anticipate and answer question, what you can do is find out what the hook is per post. So let's say one of the questions they've asked is like, well, how do I make people in my pipeline pay me to be on the wait list? Okay, that's a good question, right? So a great hook for that would be, mm, my step-by-step process for making pipelines and a paid wait list. So it's basically telling them the same thing, but it's like a how I or what I do. So it's like an authority position. You can also do it as a question. Want pipelines to become paid wait list? Here's how. So it's an intent-based question. There could be discovery where like they'll discover something. Discover how pipelines become paid wait lists for content experts. Discover how content experts make pipelines into paid wait list. Or you can make like a secret information thing. So you could say something along the lines of the secret advantage content marketers have for making pipelines into paid wait lists. The idea is that the hook should be relevant to the outcome of the post, summarize it into a single sentence in a way that gets them excited for that outcome. Finally, focus on one idea. The worst content can be the best written stuff, but if it doesn't have one idea, it's useless. And this rule applies actually across from email conversion marketing. Most emails suck because they're asking you to do like 30 things. The best emails ask you one thing, just like a great piece of content asks you to do one thing. It teaches you one thing. And the reason for that is our minds can take away one thing. When you introduce multiple things, you lose them. Now, there are variations to this rule. I want to make this point real quick. If you are going to, like, let's say you're a digital agency and you're going to publish your MarTech stack, because maybe your customer asks, like, what all software do you use? And be like, here's the softwares, here's your hook. So it's like, here's the top 5 softwares we use to generate $10,000 a month in net revenue for XYZ clients. Now, what you have is one idea, which is all the softwares, right? But if you said like, here's how we generate $10,000 a month in net revenue for CPG brands, and then you publish about a bunch of softwares, that's not one idea. The one idea is how you do it. And then how you do it is 5 different responses. Whereupon if it's a blanket statement, it's like, here's everything we use. Telling them everything is just the one idea. So there are variations to this rule, but the takeaway is you want them to be able to read what you read and understand it at a glance. Donald Miller has this great book called StoryBrand, and he has this core concept in there called the caveman grunt test. And this usually applies to like a headline of a website, but the same principle works really well here. So the basic principle is a caveman should be able to read this and grunt and like have a grunt of understanding, go, right? And when you have one idea, it's easy to understand one idea. The one idea of this whole training here is that you're going to learn how to create content that makes your pipeline into a paid wait list. And everything else explains that. So what do you publish? How do you balance the difference between a story, an outcome post, an idea post? It's a good question. So you have a system for creating the content. You're asking what the lead would want to know and the order the lead would ask the questions in, and you're anticipating and answering them as the flow of your content. But you don't want to just 1, 2, 3 every time. You want to have different flows because there are going to be different types of leads that respond to different types of posts. In my intro, I said I made around $85,000 in Q4 using content marketing. And I used four types of posts. I used carousels, which didn't perform for me because I'm not a great designer. I used in depth explanation posts and I used anecdotal posts. My in depth explanation post won me a $15,000 $15,000 rebrand consulting product for an agency. My personal story post won me a $70,000 contract. I got two clients. Now, I didn't do outbound for any of this. This is the power of the content marketing, but I found the right flow. So I find the three most effective things is balancing the stories, the outcomes, the ideas. I'm going to explain each and then how to choose. So a story is a personal story that is kind of a case study, kind of an experience thing. It depends on what your service is. So let's say I am trying to market to digital service owners who have companies of 5 or less employees who do 2 million a year, and I know that my customer is just overstressed. They're working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. They're not seeing their family enough. They feel guilty about it. So I would have a story post about people that I've helped get out of that situation, because using the pipeline to paid waitlist process actually reduces work between 40 and 60% while increasing your revenue. So I would have a great hook that would say something like, okay, so I had one guy who actually he wanted to take a beach vacation, but he's afraid he would be able to miss out on clients. So he was going to go on the vacation, but he wasn't actually going to do anything with his family. And so it started with I can't remember exactly, so I apologize. If you go back and find it, you'll know it. But it's in my LinkedIn feed. But basically, it's like my client called me crying, and he told me that this was the first time his daughter had spent more than one uninterrupted hour with him. Here's how he did it and why he had to make this choice. And then I tell the story of like the outcomes he experienced. So I start with his problem. His problem is that he had no systems in his like agency to generate qualified leads. And so if he wasn't at the head of the agency constantly doing the work and not using systems, he would lose money. And that freaked him out. Like he had good money coming in, but he didn't have the results he wanted. So I tell the story about how like he was like successful, but only because he kept his hand on the wheel, and that he was afraid he would lose everything if he took his hand off his wheel, but he was already losing his family. So then it became a success story of how he didn't just have less work and more money, but he got to spend time with his family. And of course, like the end of it is just, if you're struggling with the same thing, let me know. Happy to help, right? The CTA is super simple. Now let's look at an outcome post. An outcome post allows you to show off results either that you have created or that you can future pace you could create. This is great because a lot of people are creating new things, launching new offers, or they can't share a lot of details because of NDAs. So an outcome post can be is like how I would XYZ. So if you can't share an outcome or a study or what you need to be like, you can share how you would do it as an outcome. So let's say that you're a social media marketing agency who helps creators grow their personal store revenue by $200,000 net a year, right? So I'd be like 200,000. Let's say 240 to make the math easy. So how I would generate an extra $20,000 a month in net for creator stores. So that would be the post. That's the hook. And then the post would explain that. You're talking about an outcome. Now, if you have an outcome you can talk about that, because the more personal people can get with the experience and see and like the outcome they want in another situation, the more they'll think that outcome is within reach for them. Okay, so now we've got stories. We got a way to connect with them on the emotional level. We have outcomes, which allow them to future pace and see themselves in the world they want. And finally, ideas. Don't gatekeep your ideas. Your ideas are the path the customer needs to the outcome they want. And this is always a metaphor I make. It's like your customer is here. The outcome they want is here. Your ideas are the bridge that you build for them between the two. So great ideas, I always say this, great ideas get leads validating you faster. So this content marketing thing is my idea on how to do content marketing. I'm not gatekeeping it. I'm not asking for your email, right? I mean, I'm going to ask you to talk with me later if you want me to do it for you. But for the most part, I'm giving everything away because I'm not gatekeeping the idea. It's the implementation that people pay for. And so if you open up the idea, you make it easy. Now, some of you are like, hey, like I have a software element. Like you can't really have the idea. I can tell them how the software works, but they still have to pay for it. That's fine. Give them a demo. Show them how they could apply the software. Give them ideas on how to get the outcomes they want using the software and show it, record videos with it. The goal is to take down the barriers to yes by anticipating and answer the things they'd want to see. So if I am thinking about buying, let's say you have a software that makes ad creation easier for CPG brands doing less than $10 million a year. And I've been like looking at your stuff, but then you have a series of like 3 or 4 videos that show a SKU that's very similar to mine and how you didn't just create ads, but they looked really great and you're able to do it very quickly. Or if you want an even better idea, sit down somebody that's never used it and have them create it and record them and explain how they were able to refine it and show that process. I'm going to buy because it's like, holy shit, like I know how to do this. And like, I can do it 100 times better than that guy. And that stuff came out great. And so you're giving them the idea in the form of the like implementation. So how do you balance it? I like to find that it's good to have one outcome, 3 ideas, and 1 story. So usually what I do is I open the week with an idea, and then I have an outcome, and then I have a personal story, and then I have 2 more ideas. Because to me, the emotional roller coaster is like I'm back at work, and if I'm like running my own agency, it's like, oh god, I hate this. Like I'm gonna have to do this for the next couple hours. Oh, here's an idea on how to make it easier. Cool. And the next day it's like, man, it's been rough. Like I don't know what I'm gonna do. And then you read an outcome post about and someone in your situation getting results faster. Okay, cool. Next day, you're kind of a little hopeful, but you're like, oh, like I don't really think that's going to work for me. I'm just exhausted. Then you read a post about somebody that was exhausted, like a personal story, and the outcome they had. Oh, cool. And then the next 2 days, you have ideas. Now you're geared up, right? So you have this emotional flow. So you have idea, outcome, story, idea, idea. And of course, you can play with it. One thing you should be doing every month is just tracking, like what's working, what's not working, what are people loving, what are people not loving, and then going from there and building out every month off what you got from the last. A lot of the content I create for YouTube, I look at YouTube's analytics and I say, like, what are people engaging with? Like, what are they really looking for? And how can I give it to them a way to not just get them the answers they need, but to help me grow, right? And I'm not just putting stuff out there for the sake of putting it out there. I'm going into Gamma. I'm creating the docs using the systems. I'm explaining it in order people can have. I'm making it easy for people to get the answers they want by iterating on things that they're showing within their actions, okay? Part 3, how do you get content to get leads to sell themselves? So this is like the big thing, right? Like it's one thing to write content. It's another thing to write content that gets leads selling themselves. And here's how I do it, both for myself and for my customers. 1, consistency. You need to be out there every day. And the reason is the best people show up all the time. There's this concept that Jeb Blunt published, one of my favorite books, but it's this idea like volume negates luck. The more you're out there, the greater your reach, the more time leads have to like validate you with content. And eventually they'll find whatever the right thing they need to see is because you'll cross it. It could be a personal story about somebody who, instead of going to the beach, got an A-frame in the woods and left it all behind. For another person, it might be like, holy shit, your idea to implement a subscription model with Patreon never occurred to me, but makes so much sense. I'm going to use it. Everybody will find their way into your content. The more consistent you are, the more reliable you're seen as too. Like somebody that's doing it all the time is clearly an expert. Like if you go to my LinkedIn, I've been publishing for 2, 3, 4 years. You can go back post after post after post after post. That shows I'm not just doing the work, but I'm working and I'm constantly evaluating and adapting. It's proof, right? Second, be yourself. One of the worst things people do is they try to get this like buttoned up white tie thing. It's like, well, I'm an expert. I'm going to do this. Nobody wants me. I'm a weird dude. I was a professional magician and hypnotist for 10 years. And I just let that shine through. I don't hide it, right? I'm a mind control marketer and people like that because they like me. And well, not everybody likes me, but I work with people that like who I am. And you want the same. Like you want your voice to attract your ideal customer because it makes it easier for you to not just serve them better, but they stay with you for longer. Okay, you want to be consistent, you want to be yourself, and finally, you need to push the next step. Like I said, don't ever sell the final purchase off a single post, but always sell the next step. I see it all the time, like amazing content marketing, stuff that just blows me out of the water, and there's never an ask. They'll have hundreds of comments, no ask, and it's just such a lost opportunity. You don't want to sell the final step. You want to sell the next step. And I always make this point, like small journeys are easier to take. And if you take each part of a big journey small, people will get there faster, right? It's that idea of like, you can't eat 100 hot dogs, but you can start with 1. I know it's gross, but it's the best I can come up with in that moment. So let's reiterate. So you want to be consistent. You want to be consistent. You want to be clear, but most of all, you'll always want to be asking them to take the next step. Okay. So here's like the major mistakes that people make and what we can do to fix them. So the first is what I call the 5% rule. And this applies to every single service provider, agency, consultant, and coach out there. Most content, most sales processes, most offers are just 5% off from getting the yes. In fact, if you were to give me 100 sales calls that didn't work, and they're with qualified leads. Let's assume that we know tire kickers and we get rid of them quickly. Like 100 qualified sales calls that didn't close, I bet I could go in and close 80 or 90% of them because I can step back and go, hey, this is what they were looking for. Like, it was right there, but because they didn't think to voice it, you didn't think to talk about it, and so they never didn't give you the contract, right? So most content is missing 5% of what it needs. And that's why I use this one idea, one question principle. With that in place, what you're giving the lead the opportunity to do is to validate you an idea at a time. And so you kind of basically use volume to negate that 5% rule. And you're also thinking of it from their perspective, which is where most of these offers miss. Like, one of the things I do when I optimize offers for content is really look at, like, not just the content, but like what needs to surround it, right? And just publishing the stuff alone might not be what that lead wants. So what would they want? It's like, well, I don't just want that. Like, I want to have like a lead generation system built into it, but I don't have a landing page. Like, oh, cool, I'll build you a feature page that collects emails for you. Oh, I don't really get emails. Oh, that's cool. I'll throw a 20 email sequence in. So that way, like, you don't have to worry about it for the first 3 months. It nurtures leads on your own. That little 5% could land me 20 more clients because now it's like, oh shit, it's like done for me. And I can put that in my content. I can put it in my offers. So always remember, like, there's something a little bit more your lead wants. And if you can figure out and give it to them, you'll be too busy. You don't even need to pay me. You'll be busy on your own. Second, formatting. Walls of text are gone. Stop publishing walls of text. Break it up. Make it easy to read. Are people there? And look, there are going to be people that are like awful. Like, I don't like these systems. They are so hard to read, and like it's clearly clickbait. Who cares? Those people are awful. You don't want them as clients anyway. What you want is people that can go through your content quickly, get the answer they need, and trust that you're not going to waste their time. So formatting is the easiest way to do that. Simple, to the point sentences. And I test different formatting in my posts all the time. Sometimes I do like blocks. Sometimes I do that thing where it goes out and in like this. Sometimes I do it almost like it's text. I just see what people engage with and I keep optimizing because what works now might not work in a year. And so by testing, you're always refining to what people tell you they need to see. And finally, there's no clear next step, right? Like, the content just ends. It becomes a closed loop. Don't have closed loops. Have a next step. Tell them to go to the next post. Tell them to sign up. Tell them to talk to you. I'm going to tell you the end of this to talk to me. You make it so people know what the next step is. They can't guess, so don't expect them to. So if you don't make these 3 mistakes, you're going to be ahead of like 90% of people. The other mistakes are more just basically quality writing, having a good copy editor, consistency. There's just things they're challenges that you'll come up against as you do it. And if you're not hiring somebody to solve it for you, you'll just have to figure out how to deal with yourself. But those are later issues. But these are the 3 big ones that will keep you from getting clients. Don't make these mistakes and you will get clients. All right, so if you want help taking your leads from curious to customer to make your pipeline into a paid lead list, click that link below. And what I'll do is I will make your pipeline problems disappear. So if you're interested, just click the link below. Happy to help. If not, find me on LinkedIn. I publish content all the time. The link's down below too. I'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much.